Hi, everyone. Thank y'all for joining us for our Beef Brunch news update for Tuesday, January 25th. Right before we jumped on, we were just saying that we hope everybody's staying warm. It's been a chilly couple of weeks, and I know as livestock shows have been going, it's been even colder under the show barns. But it gets tough at home when you're trying to break ice and do everything else, especially in Louisiana where we're not quite used to it. So I'm going to go ahead and let Vince kick it off with our updates. If he'll talk about Central and South Louisiana. I know you said you saw some snow flurries when we were on the phone Friday. I think that was that the Lafayette Parish show that you were at?
Yeah, St. Landry and Opelousas. Yeah, it's been unseasonably cold for the last few days. It is January, but for us to experience some 20s, I mean a low of 20, and my truck on yesterday morning going deer hunting was saying 17, so that was kind of crazy. But we had the clothing on, so wasn't too bad. But the cattle, surely paid the price for it. Trembling cattle for 3 days straight is certainly not anything in the wheelhouse of calling healthy. So for especially our Brahman cattle, in Central and South Louisiana, that took a toll on them for many reasons, and it don't take long for them to lose weight under those conditions. So with the predominantly our cattle herds being quarter to half in most cases in South Louisiana, it was time for that to go. And in the case of broken water lines and frozen troughs, and it was an undone task for 3 days of cutting water off, breaking water troughs, and so people fed cubes ahead of this weather to get some energy going. The ryegrass, we talked about ryegrass before we broke for the holidays, and we had a few cold spells that kind of dinged up our ryegrass. But this one really, as one of my local cattlemen texted me on Saturday morning, he said my ryegrass looks skinny this morning. I said, well, it's all drawn up, it's frozen. It was a tough few days, but on the more encouraging side of things, the calf market has been pretty good. Not a lot of calves being sold right now here at the local markets, but it's encouraging. We're seeing some 5 weight calves in the $1.60 area. Again, plainer cattle are not bringing those prices, but the better cattle that have been long weaned and had a few rounds of shots and their health is in order. We're seeing some pretty encouraging prices. Kill cow market is good. But again, the plainer cattle or the lighter hided cattle are not, lighter cattle are not bringing those prices we're seeing. If they got cows, utility cows that got conditioning on them, they're bringing in the 70s and upwards of upper 70s. So obviously there's a demand for these kill cows, and hopefully that continues into the spring. And there's a lot of positivity going in, with some of the markets here lately. But still the big conversation is fertilizer prices, and here we are pushing on February 1, and it's time to hit that second shot of top dress going into the spring. Whether we're going to be making baleage, ryegrass hay and ryegrass and clover hay, any kind of hay with ryegrass and our winter forages is going to be a costly venue. I'm still hearing $1,000 nitrogen prices per ton. It's a tough pill to swallow, and a lot of people are saying they're not going to put that second shot of top dress. And a few people are still selling cows and kind of whittling down on what don't need to be fed, and try to cut some corners, going into the spring, and with anticipation of a better market. There's a lot of scuttlebutt over some of the foreign markets. They say in China, and they shipping exporting a lot of grain, and they say we're going to have an uptick in exports on beef. Jason probably will touch on that some, but it's we need something to improve, because there is just no margin of profit at this point in time in the cattle industry. For us in South Louisiana, we're already dinged with freight when it's coming to get them to where they need to be going, leaving, whether it's a sale barn or a straight out purchase on the farm. Freight is a killer, and it takes all the profit out of it. So, but we've had a fairly easy winter, and so to speak. It's dry. I mean, we're dry for South Louisiana. We're expecting about 3/4 of an inch to an inch of rain in areas from Alexandria south today. Some of my friends down along the coastal parishes, they're doing things in the marsh right now, and they still got grazing cattle having an easy time down there. They got joint grass that, it's probably got dinged up with this cold weather we had over the last 3 or 4 days. But there's still something for those cattle to eat, and that's their caveat down there, is that they put cattle in the marsh in this fall and the winter, and they feed very, very little hay as far as forage and hay in a hay form. So that's how they do things down there. But it's been real easy. Cattle can get around. It's dry. Um, so that's in a nutshell. That's what's going on in Central and South Louisiana. It's been fairly easy. A lot of hay got fed the last 5 or 6 days in anticipation of this cold weather, and they say we're going to have another front on Wednesday, Thursday or so. That's going to drop us down into the upper 20s again. So it is January, and I always say if we can make it through mid-February, we're probably going to be in pretty good shape. And hay stocks are pretty good shape, but I mean we had poor quality hay going into the winter because we couldn't cut hay until July and August in some cases, our first cutting. So supplement tubs of $100. I call them a lollipop when I go into the feed store, and they kind of laugh at me. I said it's truly a lollipop for the cows, but they having a hard time keeping up with some of those quantities or truckload quantities coming into the needs of the local cattlemen. So hopefully we'll get past the next 30 to 45 days and we get spring.
Thank you. Lee, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for our Northwest region update, please.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Very glad to be with you all today. Ditto on a lot of what Vince said. Last time we talked on one of these news updates, we were just on the heels of that first round of low 20-degree temperature that just zapped this ryegrass and all winter forages, not just ryegrass, wheat, oats, cereal rye, clovers, everything. And since we've spoken, we did get a little bit of a warm up, and just right in the last few days, the ryegrass and clover started to turn just a little bit. We started to see just a little bit of recovery. I wouldn't say tremendous growth, but it didn't look like the surface of the moon, if you will. And then we're right back at it. The last few days have been extremely cold. And it's not so much the daytime highs, which have been low. It's those nighttime lows getting down into the 20s and not getting above freezing until on into the afternoon, and so on and so forth. And it's just kind of knocked it right back. The condition of winter forages is just abysmal in the Northwest region, and it's weighing heavy on a lot of producers' minds. It couldn't come at a worse time, really, with these high costs of supplements that we've talked about so much on here. And like Vince says, those $100 lollipops, boy, you sure can go through them. And, a lot of people, whenever they're grazing these cattle, specifically weanlings or yearling cattle on this ryegrass, they budget on feeding these cattle during the preconditioning phase, and just making the assumption that by this time of year, kind of drawing back on some of those supplemental feedings and relying on this winter forages. Well, that's just not the case right now. These cattle are having to be supplemented in a lot of cases. Not all the cases. I've seen some ryegrass that fared just a little bit better, and some wheat that wasn't dinged up quite as bad, but overall, it's a fairly bleak picture around here. Last 5 or 6 days, I've been getting inundated with calls on the cattle market, and I tell them all, if I knew what was, if I could look into a crystal ball and tell them what these cattle prices are going to do, I probably would be in a higher paying job than what I am. But I've been telling the cause of it. What's causing these people to call is a lot of them are those that are grazing these weanling cattle, whether they're their own cattle, spring born. That would be spring of 2021 born cattle that were weaned in the fall and then backgrounded and turned out on ryegrass, or maybe some yearling type cattle out there, a little bit older type cattle. It's not really people looking for market advice on calves, like fall born calves or so on and so forth. A lot of people kind of have their finger on the trigger, so to speak, with the condition of these winter forages. If you've got some of these bigger cattle grazing them and you're laying out $325 a ton on some supplemental feed, maybe a little less than You know, I can tell you from a personal perspective, it sure looks enticing to unload those, and everybody's wanting to know what this market is going to do. And I don't have an adequate answer. I mean, we're seeing a few signs. I kind of go over with them in my mind what's weighing so heavy on these markets, what's influencing these markets in such a fashion. One of it is, and I'm sure Jason's going to talk a lot about some of these topics, but I'll just give you my perspective. One is price of corn. This corn is just weighing heavy on us right now, and there's a lot of pressure from that, I would say. Late last week, we saw this cattle on feed report. And I'm not going to steal Jason's thunder on that. I know he'll probably cover it, but it was a very bearish. It was expected to be bearish, but it was a very bearish cattle on feed report. The other factor that's going to be influencing the markets, in my opinion, coming up here in the next this month is the national annual cow inventory report. Hope I've got all that right. USDA report that estimates the size of our cattle herd, and I think everybody's in agreement that you're going to see a pretty significant drop. I mean, gosh, y'all have been hearing what Jason's been reporting on these cow slaughter numbers, what Vince is talking about, these high killing cow prices, and these all these factors that have caused people to unload on these older, open, or just cullable type cows. We know that our cattle inventory is going to drop. The question in my mind is how much, and Jason may get on that a little bit, but it's weighing heavy on these producers up in my country that I deal with. What's going to happen here in the next week or two, next month or two, the what ifs in regards to what this weather is going to do on these winter forages. Spring can't get here enough soon enough. Like Vince said, we're a little behind them, being a little farther north, but still, I would hope the end is in sight when we're starting to see some longer days. If we can start seeing these temperatures moderate just a little bit, start getting some growth on it. Of course, the fertilizer weighs heavy on folks, that are looking at maybe needing a top dress or put a little bit of supplemental nitrogen, and they're faced with these astronomical bills. So that's weighing heavy on people as well. Needs to hurry up and warm up. I'm going, and I guess I'll close with this. We're not in moisture condition. We're not in as bad a shape as Jason's area is, but we're not far behind them. Drought is still persistent around this part of the country, and talk to many producers that tell me some of the chores and tasks they're able to perform in January that ordinarily they wouldn't dream of being able to run a tractor or a truck across the ground this time of year, but yet they're able to drive it. So we know we're dry, expected to get some rain today, and look forward to it very much so. That I'm going to quit rambling and turn it back over to you, Ashley.
All right, thank you, sir. So in just a second, I'm going to turn it over to Jason. But before he gets started, Jason's going to give our Northeast update now, and then he's going to come back later and do our market update. So Jason, if you'll go ahead and please do our Northeast region update, and if you don't mind going ahead and talking a little bit about the Master Cattleman program you've got coming up as well.
So I'm going to share my screen here because I think this kind of puts it into perspective, and hopefully y'all can see that. So this is the most recent drought monitor that we have, and as you look at Northeast Louisiana, and I've had the opportunity to look at some oats over that direction this past Thursday, and looking at some small grains and some ryegrass up on the northeastern side of Union Parish last week. Whenever you start talking about this picture right here, coupled with the things that Lee and Vince have both said about her high fertilizer prices, you talk about weighing on your mind about what to do. And do you fertilize? Do you not fertilize? Is the grass going to be able to utilize it? We still keep getting these huge fluctuations in temperature, and these cold nights are not very kind to that. Even though it is a cool season, whenever we start getting down into the teens like that, it's just not very friendly at all. So I thought this would be a good way just to put it into perspective as we look at the drought monitor and the current situation that we are under, that northeastern side of the the state is in D3, which would be considered extreme drought. And then just about the entire part of North Louisiana is in severe drought. So everything that Lee and Vince have said is spot on. So I'm going to take this a step further and go back a little bit and look at the national picture in terms of drought. So I think one of the things that is troubling for our market here, a lot of our calves leave Louisiana and go into this area right here, that Oklahoma Panhandle, out into the Panhandle of Texas. A lot of our cattle go out there and are grazed out until they get them a little bit heavier, put some cheaper gain on them before they go into the feed yards. And there's just not a whole lot of wheat out there to be had, grazing wheat out there, because of this picture right here in terms of what that drought looks like out there in the Panhandle, where all those big southern plain grazing areas are. So that's not being very friendly to our market right now in terms of where to go with those calves whenever we sell them down here in the South. So with that being said, we will talk a little bit more about markets later on. But I just wanted to look at the drought monitor now and try to reinforce what Lee and Vince have both said. In Northeast Louisiana, we are extremely dry. If ever there was a year that I wish we could go and put up hot wire over some cover crops in Northeast Louisiana, this would be the year. And typically, you can't do that because cattle will be wading around up to their bellies in mud. But this is one of those years I really wish we had just a lot of hot wire and we could do a lot of grazing on some cover crops over there in that crop ground. But it's extremely dry. I guess, as I always tell y'all, my glass is normally half full. We all know with these cool season crops, the cereal grains, the ryegrasses, we all know what they can do once we start getting a turn in the weather. So as Lee said a while ago, we need some warmer weather. We know that we'll make up some of that crop once we do start making a little bit change in the weather towards a more spring type weather pattern than a winter type weather pattern, and we can make up a lot of that growth. But right now it's just kind of sitting still, and I think the word that Vince used was looking a little skinny. I like that. I'm gonna have to use that in conversation as I go through the next week or so. It is looking a little skinny. So with that, Ashley, I'll turn it back over to you. Oh, Master Cattleman, sorry about that. So we will be hosting a Master Cattleman class in Northeast Louisiana beginning the first Monday of March. Dr. Edwards has all of that class material posted on our website. Hopefully she'll put a link to that in the comments of the video where y'all can locate that easily. But that Master Cattleman class will end, I believe it's the second Monday in May. Cost of the class is $150. It's a 10-week course. We cover everything from pasture management, agronomy, and weed management, all the way to nutrition, animal handling, animal health. So if you're not familiar with the program, I encourage you to look into it. It may be something that'll help educate you a little bit, learn some of the newest practices and some of the newest research that's out there. Thank you, Ashley.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So for those of you that normally listen to us, as I mentioned a while ago, so I'm about to wrap up with a few things, and then just hold tight because Jason's coming back on to do our market report for us. So in addition to the Master Cattleman that he just mentioned, just a few other events, we have kicked off our Advanced Master Cattleman class already for this year. We just kicked that off last Friday. And then for our next Beef Brunch, for our Beef Brunch webinar, we have Dr. David Lawman from Oklahoma State coming in, and he's going to be talking about hay feeding efficiency. So that's going to be on February 8th. And I know, as all three of the guys just said, we're right in the thick of feeding hay right now with the weather and everything that we've had. But so I think it's going to be a very timely topic. I think it's going to be something that can continue to help you as we kind of progress through the last little bit of the winter. As Vince said, I hope that we make it through the middle of February and we're done with our winter that we're having here in Louisiana. I hope that we make it through Friday and we're done with it after this freeze personally. But again, February 8th at 10:30, a live event with Dr. David Lawman, beef cattle specialist and professor at Oklahoma State. So please plan on joining us for that live event, and we'll continue to advertise that. As Jason mentioned, we've got his Master Cattleman program online. So if you go to lsuagcenter.com, look under livestock, look under beef cattle, you can see all of our programs on there. You're able to see the Master Cattleman by region as we get those, if we get that information. They're offered at different times in the year for each region. But if you ever have any questions on those programs, please feel free to reach out to one of us and we'll get you that information. So hang tight, and then Jason will get your market report coming up in a moment. But thank you all for joining us, and we'll be back with you in a couple of weeks.
So as we look at the markets for the weekend in January the 21st, Lee had already mentioned earlier that we did have a bearish cattle on feed report that came out on Friday. When you couple that bearish report with a lot of geopolitical concerns that are going on worldwide, we've got drought concerns expanding out of the West. We can expect it, and we'll see as we look at some of these numbers, our markets are turning a little bit lower. So yet again, just whenever we've gained a good bit of ground on the cattle side, and our cattlemen are finally starting to realize a lot of these fundamentals are playing in their direction, we can't seem to catch a break. So as we dive into it, we'll look at some of those numbers. So cattle and calves on feed for the slaughter market in the United States for feedlots with a capacity of 1,000 or more head totaled 12 million head on January 1, 2022. Confirmed that cattle were moving off drought-stricken areas into feed yards at a rapid pace. So those drought concerns that we've mentioned a couple of times already definitely played into some of these numbers, especially as we look at placements. The inventory was 1% above January 1, 2021. That inventory included 7.36 million steers, down 1% from the previous year, and heifers accounted for 4.68 million head, or 38.8% of the total on-feed inventory, which was up 2% from 2021. To give you a little bit of perspective, on January 2014, at the most recent cattle cycle inventory low, the percentage of heifers on feed in that particular inventory was 35.5% of the total. Getting back to the current cattle on feed report, placements in feedlots during December total 1.96 million head, which was 6% above 2020. Placements were the highest for December since the series began in 1996. Because placements of cattle on feed affect future supplies, cattle prices for future months are impacted more by changes in placements than prices for current delivery. And we'll see some of those implications in the futures markets. Maybe not directly in this report, but I'll give you a little bit of insight as we go forward. In the cattle market, fed cattle traded in the South at a 137, which was mostly $1 higher than the previous week. They also traded in the North mostly at 137, which was steady to about $1 softer than the previous week for the northern region, northern trading region. Settlements ended the week with February futures trading down 40 cents at 137.92. April trading down $1.07 at 142.10, and June trading down $1.07 at 137.30. So I'll give you a little bit of side note here, a little bit of insight. So we record these reports on Monday. They're released on a Tuesday. So we're reporting the week ending right now, January 21st, but I'm actually recording on the 24th. So we've already got settlements for Monday. So I can tell you that those settlements are down $1 to $2 on our fed cattle futures and on our feeder cattle futures. So that reaction to those placement numbers, we're starting to realize in our futures prices. Getting back to the week ending January 21st, 500 to 600 pound steers, medium and large 1s and 2s, sold between 168 and 173, which was $3 to $7 lower than the previous week. 7 800-pound feeder steers, medium and large 1s and 2s, sold steady at $148, which is about $4 lower than the previous week. On that same class of cattle, settlements ended the week with March trading down $1.65 at $163.30, April down $1.40 at $168.12, and May down 87 cents at $171.92. On our cull cow market, our killing cow market for the week, average yielding lean cows ended the week ranging 58 to 59 cents, which is about 5 cents higher than the previous week. So we continue to see a good bit of strength in our cull cow market. As we look at feedstuffs, soybean meal is trading down $23 at $417.60 a ton. Soybean hulls are up $10 at $170 a ton. Cottonseed meal is down $10 at $315 a ton. Whole cottonseed is steady at $305 a ton. Rice bran is steady at $195 a ton. Corn gluten feed meal, that's the 60% product, is up $10 at $695 a ton. DDGs are up $16.50 at $204 a ton. And corn is up 8 cents a bushel at $6.41 a bushel. So with that wraps up our markets for the weekend of January the 21st.